Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Decryption, and I hope you are well. In the last race controller episode, we made it so we can start the race with the player in any direction and they will smoothly rotate around to face the correct way. And then we fixed a couple of other bugs with the particles making them look nice and the triggers from stopping them from double lapping themselves. However, in this tutorial, we're going to look at adding the ability for the player to take shortcuts. At the moment, the markers spawn in a single direction and you must follow that path. Meanwhile, the enemies are free to take shortcuts. It's hardly fair. So let's get started. So the way our current system works, which I briefly talked about in the last episode, was each patrol point is linked to another patrol point, but with the option of being linked to multiple. So for example, this patrol point over here is only linked to that one there. It's just a one-way patrol point. Technically it's linked backwards over there if we want to run previously, but we don't need it in our system. However, in this location, you've actually got the option of taking two. You've got this shortcut here, or you've got the longer route around here. The AI will just randomly pick one and go that way. But for the player, we need the option to go either way. You could technically just remove the patrol points from either end and just put one here and say go whichever way you want. That works too. But they're almost always going to go this way because it will be right there instead of this way. We want the player, like if this is covered up with trees, to might miss it, add some challenging aspect to it. But equally, if you're running around the city, you've got an option you might want to go both ways. So what we're actually going to do is instead of spawning our trigger at the single patrol point that we've picked, or the random one of these, we're actually going to spawn it at all available options and then clear it up afterwards if we don't need it. And we're going to do it in a really performant, pulled way, so we're not constantly destroying and recreating things during the mission, because we've spent a lot of time making it very performant by moving and reusing existing things. So back on our BP race controller, inside our race countdown function, we start the race as running. And inside here, we check. Inside our race controller, we have our spawn player markers function. This function is pretty epic, but all it basically does, if the markers don't exist because we're only just starting the race, it will spawn the primary marker, which is the red one, the secondary marker, which is the grey one, and then it will spawn the trigger for us to actually run into the correct patrol point, detect that the player's hit it, and then it updates it. Meanwhile, the one above simply grabs our existing stuff, moves it into position, including the trigger. So the main issue we've got is we need multiple triggers. But because we've made it really performant by reusing it, we don't want to undo that by destroying and recreating it each time. Because a race could be quite busy, you might have 50 checkpoints in, and if you're destroying and recreating all 50 triggers each time, that's going to be quite a lot of performance hits you could potentially save. I actually want to give the patrol points a weight, if you wish. So this shortcut here, I imagine trees in front of it. I don't want to randomly pick that one and tell the player to go that way. It needs to be a shortcut the player needs to discover themselves. So even though I want both areas to be available for us to run through, I only want the marker to be on the default place or the higher weighted point. So what I'm actually going to do is in my BP patrol point that we've added, I'm actually going to add a path weight score as a float. By default, I'm just going to set this to 1. But what I mean by this is each point is just going to have a weight assigned to it, and if I give something a high weight, say 10, it'll have an even bigger chance of being picked compared to the ones that will have 0 on it. They won't be picked at all. So where we've got the get next patrol point function here inside our BPI patrol points, what I'm going to do is actually open the BPI patrol points, and I'm going to add a boolean to the input called use weighted paths, and I'll compile and save. By default it'll be false, so everything will still work the same. But inside this function, what we can now do is instead of randomly rolling over it, I'm going to first check if we're using weighted paths. If we aren't, then it can just randomly get one like normal. That's it. That's completely fine. However, if we are using weighted points, I'm going to copy the select so we get the correct array, and I'll just do is forwards to handle the selection. And I'm going to loop over all of these array items. And now that we're looping over it, I'm going to get the total weight from it. I'm going to get the weighted score, and I'm actually going to tally all of these up. So I'll just promote this to a variable called total weight. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the total weight and sum all of them together, like so. And that's going to give us a large number. So if we've got 10 waypoints, each with a score of 10, we'll have 100 in the total weight. And we'll just add the total weight to it. But what this means we can do is we can generate a random number between 0 and the total weight. And then we'll find which has the weight included in that one, and we will use that patrol point, giving us a fair example. So for example, if I set this one to 7 and this one to 3, this will have a 30% chance of being chosen, whereas this has 70% chance. Or if I set that to 0 and that to 1, that will never ever show a waypoint marker, but this one always will. So on completed, I will just do random float in range. I will add the total weight into the max one here. So we have a random chosen weight. And then finally, we're going to re-loop back over the array. So let's just promote this to a local variable to store it, called chosen points. Just means we don't have to redefine it again. And I'll just for each loop over this chosen points array. And I will get the score again. And then I'm going to add this to another local variable called the accumulator. And what this accumulator is going to do is for each point, it's going to add on the path score that it's currently looking through. And we want to check, after we've set it, if the accumulator is currently less than or equal to our random value. If it is, then we've found the patrol point that we want to take. So we're going to return this patrol point here, which we're going to promote to a variable to keep it clean. Current patrol point. And we'll connect that to loop body, connect it to the set, and we can return the current. So if you set everything to 0, the first item is just going to trigger at 0, and the system will take it, because 0 is going to be less than the accumulator of 0, because it's less than or equal to. However, if you set 1 to 70, as it loops over all these points, it will come in, it will add 7 to the accumulator and say, is the random value between 7 and whatever else is? Yes, take it. But it also keeps in the randomization. So if you want 7 and 0, it will use 7. If you have 7 and 3, it will give it a 70% chance of running. So it seems complex, but it will work perfectly fine for what we need. Just make sure you connect it up to the true, and we will wrap this in a very large comment, just saying what it's doing. Loop over every patrol point, pick the weighted option. And one minor thing, just before we do leave this section, just make sure that you're checking if the random chosen weight is less than or equal to the accumulator. You don't want it the other way, where the accumulator is always less than the random chosen weight, otherwise it will never work. So now, back on our spawn player markers, we can actually look at combining the marker array that handles our current patrol point. Because we need the player to be able to hit any marker that's a primary marker, we need to store the list of patrol points that's accessible, so the array that we've just created with the weighted option. So even though we're only going to use the weighted option to actually show the marker, we actually need all available waypoints that the player can access. And then we're going to store this as a map, so patrol point, with the trigger that is used by it. So we can link them together. We won't need to do this in the secondary markers because they're just for visibility only. So what I'm going to do is create a new variable, new patrol points. I'm going to set it to a type of map. And I'm going to make sure that the value option is our TSPA racing minigame. So this way we can link each patrol point to its associated trigger just for the player. So we still want to keep the current patrol point because that's going to be our main patrol point. So the one that will actually have the markers on it. So we don't need the next points just for now. So when we first come in, we will get the starter and patrol point, find the weighted path, store it, spawn the markers. But now we need a way to actually spawn a trigger per marker. So in order to populate our map for new patrol points, I'm going to come and create a new function called update trigger pooling. because we don't want to be respawning the triggers each time. We want to pull them and reuse them if we can. I'm going to pass it an input of the racer detail, so we know everything we need to know about the character and such. So I'm going to pass it the array of patrol points, which will just be a BP patrol point. And this is what we're going to get from the current patrol. We'll use the next array, what's built into it. I'll set it to a type of array so we can pass it into it. And now we can start looking at building the pool out. So it's super simple, so just follow along here. So from patrol points, we're going to get the length of it. A length of an array is different to the way an array works. An array starts at 0. A length is always add 1 on top of it. So if you have 5 items in an array, the length will be 5, but you can only loop over it 4 times because it starts at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the length. So just simply come back off the length and minus off of it and just take 1. And then from here, we're just going to do a standard for loop. Not a for each loop, a for loop, which lets us use numbers to define the length. We'll plug that into the last index. So we're now looping over all the patrol points in here. So I'm just going to come and do a for each loop off of the patrol points. And then I'm going to store the array index as a local variable called patrol point index. And I'll connect that up. I'll also store the current patrol point as another variable called current patrol point. And this just means we can reuse it easier later. So we actually need a place to store all of the triggers that we've spawned, because then other players can potentially reuse it if you are doing a multiplayer game. So I'm just going to come and create a variable here called pulled trigger points. And I'm going to set this to an array, and it'll just be a type of our TSPA racing minigame. And it's not a local variable, it is a live one, but I will make it private because we don't need to worry about it. We can drag off of the pulled trigger points and we can say, is valid index 0, so the first one, has it got an item? If it has got an item, true, then it means we can use it. So I'm going to take the pulled trigger points and I'm just going to get the first one. Then I'm going to set its location to be the current patrol point, and we'll get that actor location, like so. The only other thing we need to do is actually make sure it's active, so when we get rid of the trigger, because we don't need it anymore, we can deactivate it. So back on our trigger sphere player arrival, so the base trigger sphere, I'm just going to add a custom event called set active. And inside here, I'm just going to drag off and do set actor collision enabled. And I'll tick it because we want to enable it. Set actor collision, and I'll just connect it to the event like so. And instead of set actor enable collision, I'll just rename this to be active. And we'll pass in whether or not this trigger is active, and it will basically disable it. And with that done, we can now go back and we can drag off of this get and call set active. And we can tick it because we want this one running and usable. Next, we actually need to assign that patrol point to this trigger, so they're linked together. And that's what our map is going to be for. So I'm just going to create a local variable here, and I'm going to call it linked patrol triggers. And I'm going to set it to a type of patrol point, or BP patrol point, and I'll make it a map, and I'll set it to our TSPA racing minigame. And with that local variable, right at the end of this, we can now take this, we can add to it. The current patrol point will be the key, so that's the first one. And then the pulled trigger point will be the final one we can add to the map. After we've added it to the map, we can now remove it from the pulled trigger points because we have successfully used it. It's no longer available to be used, like so. So let's wrap this in a comment saying trigger is available, take it from the pool. Nice and easy. However, if it's false, it means it doesn't have a trigger point anymore. Either it's all been used up or there was never one there in the first place, which is totally okay. So this is where we create a new trigger. So just down here, I will do spawn actor from class. The class will be our TSPA racing minigame. The spawn transform, I'm just going to split it. I will get the current patrol point's location, plug that in. I'll make sure the collision handling is always spawn ignore collisions because that's what we want it to do. Then instead of adding it to the pool for later use, we already know we actually need it. So all I'm going to do is simply take this add and just plug it straight into it like so. So we can take this value and plug it like that. And this one is going to be our add new trigger. We don't need to worry about making it active because it's active by default. And now after we've done that, on the completed of the for each loop, so the next thing we need to do after we've found a trigger or added one, we need to loop over the pool. So we're going to drag the pool trigger points. We're going to for each over everything that's remaining inside there. So as you can see, we're taking it out of it. So we're going to loop over everything that remains. And we're simply going to call set active on it because we no longer need it, like so. So we'll just call that deactivate old triggers. Then we can just drag off the completed and simply return. We want to add a return, which is going to be our map. So I'll call it linked patrol triggers. And it'll be a type of BP patrol point, which will be a map to our TSPA racing minigame triggers. And then we can add the local variable that we've got. The final thing we need to do, we need to add back in the trigger points that we can use. So up here, we remove it when we're actually using it. And equally, if we add a new one, we don't ever add it back into the pool. But when we come back to this function here, when we first come into it, we need to actually take all of the patrol points we've got and add them back into the pool so then we can reuse them here. It's super simple, so we'll just make a bit of space. We'll add another input to it, which instead of being the patrol points, will be our existing patrol triggers map, which will be the old one of this. So we come into here, we generate our map and return it. The next time we come into here, this will be the previous one. Then we can simply get the values, we can for each loop over them, and we can simply grab our pulled trigger points and add to it from this loop here. On completed is where we'll do the rest of the stuff. So after we've repopulated the patrol point, like so, which means we will come in, add the patrol point triggers, loop over them, add or reuse them, deactivate any we don't need, and then return the new setup. So now back on our spawn player markers, we can actually replace both of the moving and the spawning triggers with our new fancy map. So we'll start on the brand new one, so spawn a new trigger. We want it to get the next patrol point, and we store it in the new patrol point, so that's the main one we're going to be using. We then spawn our first world marker and store it. We then get the next one for the after marker, so the next node, the one we want to show in grey. We show that marker. We then tell it to update to the next destination. Then instead of our spawn trigger, I'm actually just going to come and drag in our update trigger pooling and connect that in. The patrol points we want is actually the starting patrol point, and we want to get the next ones. So get next points. The reason is this one here is only ever going to return one, and it'll be the one we've weighted against. In my case, will be this one here. That one is weighted to always be higher at 1, and this one is weighted to be 0. So it'll never show that one, but I want both to be acceptable. So that one will only ever return that one, whereas the next points will return anything connected to it, which is what we want. So we can connect that into there. That's going to output our map of patrol point triggers, which we can now store in our pulled trigger points, which is the variable we created earlier. Our new patrol points, we can just connect it like that. Then we don't need any of this anymore, but we are going to have to do that binding. So just while we're here, we will jump back into update trigger polling. When we add a new trigger, just on the end of it, we're going to drag off the newly created trigger, and we will do bind on player arrival. And because we already created this function before, all we have to do is drag from the event, create event, and simply select our player arrived at patrol point like so. And we don't need to do that when we're reusing it because this binding will last until the trigger is destroyed, so it's very reusable. Back on our spawn player markers, we've now got everything we need so we can remove all of that code. And we've got a very nice, efficient trigger system, pooling system, which is going to be reusable across it. So the next thing we need to do is actually store this trigger pool for that player so we can reuse it. So I'm going to come to my S racer details, and instead of current arrival trigger, I'm actually going to change this to BP patrol point, and I'm going to make it a map just like we did with our TSPA racing minigame, like so. I'll rename it to player trigger patrol points, and I'll jump back into our race controller. It will error, but that's completely okay. So I'm just going to come and enable the new one, hold Alt and disconnect the old one. So the current arrival trigger, we can delete that in a moment. For the player trigger patrol points, we can just connect in our new patrol cassette. So that'll set it on the player with the current one. When we first start this race, at least in my map, it's just going to spawn one trigger for the one patrol point and store it on the character. That's completely okay. However, when we're reusing it up here, we can do the same thing, which is absolutely fantastic. And this pulled trigger here should work whether we have non 50, it will update it and generate everything it needs. So instead of the starting patrol point, we actually need to get the patrol point that the players hit. So what I mean by that is over here, where the player's not always going to just hit the main one. They could hit any patrol point. So we actually need to recognize which patrol point they've hit so we can get the next markers from that point. If we were to come here and only store that one, the next trigger point from that will be that one over there. Meaning when we hit this, it will tell the player to run down here, back up here, then turn around and come back down here, which is not what we want. We need it to continue from the path that they're on. So, back on the race controller, inside our spawn player markers, I'm actually going to pass in the patrol point that was hit. So I'll call it patrol point hit. It will be a single item because you can only ever hit a single patrol point. And then over here, where we're actually using it, instead of starting patrol point, we're just going to drag off and do patrol point hit. So this is the one they've actually ran into. We'll get the next points from that one and update the trigger pooling. We will do the same thing to the set here. We will deactivate the current arrival trigger. We will add in the trigger patrol points and connect the new patrol points to it. So we're storing it. And now that we've updated our racers array for the player, just make sure that at the beginning, when we're changing the marker to a new place, we don't want to use the current patrol point because we don't know which one they've hit. So we're going to disconnect that one. We will use the new patrol point hit and we'll connect that to the target. For the next one, we're just going to use the new current patrol point. So we'll drag backwards and do new current patrol point to get the secondary patrol point afterwards. And then instead of storing the player's current one, we just want to store the main one, which we've stored here as new current patrol point. As the player's current patrol point, we will do new current patrol point. One minor mistake I made is on the update triggers, just make sure you put the current patrol point in. We don't want to get the next ones of the one we're passing in because we've already got it, because we've already hit it. So instead, we get the next patrol point from the one we've hit. And we can also delete the current marker patrol point because I believe that's legacy as well. So we've still got some errors. Let's go and have a look at what we've got. So on this one, when the player arrives at each individual patrol point, we were trying to deactivate it in the last episode. That's still valid. However, this time, we'll just disconnect it. Instead, we'll drag off of the player triggered patrol points, and we're going to get all of the values. We'll connect it after the delay, and then we'll, for each loop, we'll, instead of calling set active enable collision, we'll just simply call our set active function, where we pass in active true. And we can tidy it up a bit by double clicking the lines and moving them around. And if we hit compile, you'll see it's successfully compiled. So even though this has now compiled, we still have one minor thing we need to sort, and that is the hit part, the patrol point hit that we've updated. So we don't actually know what patrol point we've hit because we never actually hit a patrol point. The patrol points are here just for guidance, really. We hit the triggers. But this is exactly why we've used a map. We pass in the trigger sphere that we've hit. And we've got a list here. So we can drag off the values here, and I can do a find item, and I can pass in the trigger sphere that we've hit. You'll notice it won't let us do it directly. it's just being Unreal a bit annoying. Just cast it to the TSPA racing minigame specifically. Right click and do convert to pure function and it'll let you connect. It's because this is a parent of Trigger Sphere Player Arrival, and we've made a child of TSPA, Trigger Sphere Player Arrival. For some reason, the fine's just been very blunt for what you need to do, but that's okay. So we'll make a bit of space up here, and we can drag off the patrol points and do keys. We can get from that, passing in our index that we've just found, connect the values to the keys, and then back up into the middle, like so. And this will now let us pass in the patrol point we've just hit. So we'll make some more space, like so. We'll wrap this in a comment so it's easier to debug later, saying find patrol point trigger pool, like so. We also need to go back to where we are also using player markers. So if you find on it, you'll see that we're using it in two places. One right at the beginning, where we actually start the race, which is the one we need to... One, what we've just updated, and the second one is when we actually start the race here. We need to tell it which patrol point to go to, and that is going to be our starting patrol point. You'll notice that both of these require us to pass in the patrol points map. Simply get the current racer detail, break on it, and then uncheck everything except our player trigger patrol points, which we can pass into it like. And we can do the same on the top and the bottom ones. Even if we pass in nothing to it, that's completely okay. So if we try it now and start the race, you'll see for the most part it will actually work. But we need to change a core bit of logic. So at the moment, when we start the race, we spawn the primary marker we need to run to, the red one. Then we spawn the grey marker to say the next one. So we hit this and it moves to that one. Perfect. If we run around and hit this one, it moves to the next one. Perfect. Next one. And we're always going, and it is indeed working. We need to fix the trigger issue, but that's fine. As you can see, it's working. It doesn't finish it. The problem comes when we have a shortcut. Because we're set up to go to the primary one, as soon as we hit the primary one, instead of recalculating the next one we need to go to, it simply says move the trigger to the next one, which we've already spawned. So if we hit this, it goes to there. It doesn't know about this one. So if we hit this, it kind of glitches out. Because we were meant to go there, and that's next destination was this one, it's moved it to that one instead. And then because this one's glitched out, it's moved it all the way out. So what we need to do, instead of using the next destination, which was a performance boost before, we need to change that logic so it always gets the next one from whichever one we've hit. So in our race controller, in our spawn player markers, when we're changing the marker to a new place, we're using this player next destination to set the actor location. But we no longer need to do that because that's not going to work for us. So instead, I'm actually going to use the new current patrol point here as a new location. So the one we've just found on the way to path from the one we've hit. And we're going to set the current destination there. So if we come back and try it this time, now that we're correctly calculating the next point, it should work better. So as it counts down, we can now run up to the marker. You can see it's there. We hit it, it moves to the next one that's correct. And once we hit this, it should correctly go to that one. But we're going to hit this one, and you'll see it does now indeed move to the correct place. How cool is that, ladies and gentlemen? So you may notice some of the markers are remaining visible once we spawn more of them. That is mainly down to the narrative navigator component that we have. So to hide it, all we're simply going to do is drag the navigation marker in and call deactivate and activate on it. There is a small bug with narrative navigator at the moment when we add the branch to it and connect it to like so. So if we're activating it, we activate it. If we're deactivating, we deactivate it. The small bug is only to do with screen space markers. So you'll see at the moment, even though we're deactivating and activating it properly as we need to, if I go to the race controller and start the race with a player, it all looks okay. But when we start spawning multiple markers, you'll notice that it won't actually disappear the whole thing. So you see it's active there, perfect. It's reactivated over there, perfect. But now you'll see, we've got 2. If I hit this one, it doesn't actually deactivate the entire thing. It's really weird. Because it'll deactivate the marker, and the marker for screen space, which is what we're using, binds onto on, hide, and on show and hides and shows itself. But it doesn't work. So the quick fix I've found for anyone using Narrative Navigator for your markers is on the screen space one, just make the horizontal box a variable, and then show and hide that one instead. I don't know why it's not working for the self. There might be some Unreal glitch somewhere or something I'm just really missing, but that should make it work successfully. So you'll see now as it counts down and we run towards it, it's active. This next one is active. And if we take the shortcut, you'll see it does indeed disappear correctly. How cool is that looking, ladies and gentlemen? And I've also just clicked on this primary one is so the PS1 colour scheme. You know, the little intro that everybody loves. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. In the next tutorial, the final bug fixing tutorial, we are going to look at making the player's laps actually count, because at the moment the player keeps running around over and over again. So we'll actually finish tying them in as a race contender. So we'll finish the lap and we'll increase the laps, finish the laps, and we'll add some gameplay tags so we can track which ones are the mandatory ones and which ones are the finished ones, just to make it really nice. So thank you for watching, I hope this helped. If you've got any more suggestions, please let me know, because we're slowly getting to the end of this race series now. We just need to finish off the final bug fixing, we need to add the UI, and we're looking good. So thank you for watching, I hope this helped. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.